Hello and welcome. My name's Sissy and I'm Timothy's widow. I want to thank you for joining me for tonight's video, the first in the series, Just Like the Drive-Thru, being forced to navigate grief quickly. Tonight we'll be starting with part 1, the snap back to normal myth. So get a cup of coffee, get comfy, and let's get started. Grief is a profound and complex emotion. It is a journey that demands time, patience, and understanding. Yet, in today's hurry, and often impersonal society, grieving spouses often find themselves compelled to speed through their grief journey. Realistically, there are no shortcuts or quick fixes, but many grievers feel obligated to conceal their pain behind a facade of normalcy. The societal pressure to navigate grief eerily resembles the common habit of ordering fast food at a drive-thru. We place our order, we pay, and expect everything to be perfect when we drive away. The stark reality of grief and the grief journey are vastly different. Grief is not a transaction. It is a transformation. It is a process that defies simplification. Today, we live in a society that values resilience and the ability to bounce back quickly. Grieving spouses are often subject to the unrealistic expectation of resuming their lives as if nothing occurred. But grief is like a wicked roller coaster of emotions. Grief lurches forward unpredictably and does not adhere to a rigid structure. Grief requires a fluid timeline for healing and does not adhere to the societal norms of bouncing back quickly. In this series, we'll explore the factors that contribute to grievers often feeling as though they're being rushed through a drive-through process of grief. Explore how modern society inadvertently pressures grieving spouses to pretend that everything is fine, the role of social media, and the silence surrounding grief, and the importance of mourning. Maybe then, we as human beings can begin to understand these aspects and begin to address the issue to help grieving spouses embark on a healthier journey towards healing without the constraints of modern societal expectations. We live in a society that rewards productivity, efficiency, and constant forward momentum. It's a hustle culture, with everything being due yesterday. The prevailing belief, or the snap back to normal myth, is that everyone should swiftly recover from everything, including grief, and then return to their lives as if nothing has happened. For many grieving spouses, the grief experience often feels like they have the funeral for their loved one on a Saturday, and on Monday, they need to be back at work, functioning as though their world has not just shattered into a million unrepairable pieces. This myth of snapping back to normal often leaves grieving spouses feeling both pressured and alienated. This one-size-fits-all approach to grief ignores the unique and individual nature of the grief journey and the healing process, as well as imposes an unrealistic timetable on those who are now struggling with emotional turmoil. Grief is a journey characterized by its nonlinear nature. Mourning the loss of a loved one has no fixed path or predefined duration. Each person's experience with grief is deeply personal. It is shaped by their unique relationship with their loved one, the circumstances of the loss, and their own emotional makeup. The myth of snapping back to normal or bouncing back quickly disregards the fact that grief does not follow a straightforward trajectory. If you have an illness or need a minor surgery, you receive treatment and a predicted timetable for when you should be feeling well. Grief, on the other hand, is a fluid, emotional landscape filled with peaks and valleys. There is no predicted timetable for when you will feel well again. Grieving spouses can unexpectedly find themselves overwhelmed by waves of sadness, anger, guilt, and confusion long after society expects them to have moved on. Grief does not end when the funeral service is over. After the funeral, there are financial, legal, and personal matters that must be addressed. With every phone call, every signature, and every appointment, the grieving spouse is harshly reminded over and over of the loss of their loved one. Often, these matters are dealt with in the presence of cold, unsympathetic individuals who are hustling to get through their schedule because society has been conditioned to just move through the task list as quickly as possible and on to the next. For many grieving spouses, the process of getting through all these matters is not accomplished in a day. It can take weeks, months, and even years. The grief journey no longer resembles a straight path. It now resembles an insane amusement park ride filled with inclines, curves, and twists. Recovery can take far longer than just getting off the ride and stepping back into reality. This mismatch between the actual grief experience and societal expectations can lead to feelings of inadequacy and isolation for many grieving spouses. The pressure to snap back to normal often leads grieving spouses to suppress their emotions, feeling compelled to put on a brave face, hide their tears, and go on about their daily lives. While this might appear to work in the short term, it ultimately could prolong the healing process. Grief needs expression and acknowledgement. Grief needs the freedom to express those emotions. Suppressing grief could lead to complicated grief, which then could lead to more severe mental health issues such as depression and anxiety for the grieving spouse. When society fosters the expectations of a quick return to normalcy, it inadvertently encourages the suppression of grief, which could then undermine the grieving spouse's emotional well-being. It's essential for society to understand that normal does not mean returning to the exact state of being as before the loss of a loved one. Instead, grieving spouses need to discover their new normal. It's a process of finding a new equilibrium in their life, one that will accommodate their grief and acknowledge the absence of their loved one. Supportive communities and institutions could play a pivotal role in assisting grieving spouses in redefining their sense of normalcy. This support should involve allowing them the time and space to grieve without judgment. It should encourage open conversations about their feelings, and it should provide resources for professional counseling or grief support groups to all grieving spouses, regardless of their financial status or ability to pay. By shattering the snap back to normal myth and recognizing that grieving spouses need understanding, patience, and compassion, we could pave the way for a more compassionate society that acknowledges the true complexity of the grieving process. In doing so, we could create an environment where grieving spouses are not compelled to pretend that everything is fine, but rather allowed to heal in a way that honors their unique journey through grief. The snap back to normal myth is a societal expectation that exerts undue pressure on grieving spouses while failing to acknowledge the deeply personal and nonlinear nature of the grief journey. It imposes an unrealistic timeline for healing. By adhering to this myth, society inadvertently fosters the suppression of grief and reveals a genuine and very real ignorance of the complex and evolving grief process, where emotions ebb and flow and there is no set destination. Society ultimately encourages grieving individuals to hide their pain, to suffer in silence, and delays their healing. Redefining normalcy is essential so that grieving spouses can find a new sense of balance in their life that will accommodate their grief. Society must come to understand that grieving spouses can never return to their pre-loss state and that a new normal can only be found within the embrace of their own unique healing grief journey. Dispelling the snap back to normal myth could open the door to a more compassionate and empathetic society that respects the complexities of grief. By offering support, patience, and understanding, we could help grieving spouses heal in their own time and on their terms. In doing so, we could free them from the burden of pretending that everything is fine when it's not, and allow them to navigate their grief with the authenticity, dignity, and the space that they truly deserve. As always, I want to thank you so much for joining me for part 1 of Just Like the Drive-Thru, being forced to navigate grief quickly. Please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing so that you'll know when new content and when part 2 is available. As always, please feel free to comment on any of my videos. I'd love to hear from you. Let us know if you felt obligated to hide your grief or were rushed through the grieving process, and how you feel that it affected your grief journey. And last, please participate in the community poll section. Your participation really does help my channel to grow, and I would appreciate it greatly. I've been Sissy, and I am wishing you much hope, light, and love. Until the next time, my friend, take care.